To start, we will create a new project. When starting a new project, we need to consider some project parameters. Firstly, the code of practice we'd like to base the design on. Next, information for foundation design, and then lateral loading. Orion will establish all the lateral loading for the structure based off the parameters set here. In order to carry out a code-based design, the structure must be classified as a braced or unbraced structure. Finally, the project title and information to go onto calculation sheets are defined. The next stage is to define the size of the drawing sheet you would like to work with. This is because Orion will generate information that can be used in the detailing process. Next, the default story height, completing the initial project parameters. To create a model within Orion, we need to create a grid system. Here we're going to create a grid system using an axis generator to demonstrate its capabilities. In the axis generator, we can create unique values and multiple values for the creation of our grid system. The grid can be refined by adding additional grid lines. Each axis has a properties box where we can control the label and how we would like to see the line labeled. The length of the grid line can also be adjusted by using the stretch command. We can get to additional commands by right-clicking on the grid line. Here we're going to use the offset command where we can create an offset. Here we're doing a meter. Also, we have the ability to rotate the grid line. Later on, we will also be able to demonstrate how we can place curved grid lines. As you have now seen, it is an easy process to create your own grid systems. However, for many projects, we are working off other drawings typically supplied by the architect or other members of the project team. To speed up the design process, Orion can import DXF drawings of grids, columns and walls. Here you can see an architectural drawing ghosted in the Orion model, and by clicking on the Import Members button we can import axes and we map to the appropriate layer from the CAD file, and by clicking on Import Columns we can do a similar thing and map to the column layer. When importing columns, Orion is looking for continuous polylines to define its geometry. On completion, a check is automatically carried out prior to importing the objects. Here you can see the grids and the objects now imported onto level 1 of our model. By looking in 3D, we can clearly see where the columns and walls have now been placed. By dragging the window, we can change the size of the 3D preview. Now let's place some beams into our model. The beams will be 200 by 500 deep, and we're going to set the beams out on the center line. To place a beam, click the first position, holding your left button down, and let go at the second position. Note how Orion will automatically split the beams at column and wall positions. As members are added, you will see the 3D view updated automatically. Next we will place a slab. Here we're going to create a 180 thick slab. By clicking on the Loads tab, we can now look at the self weight that's calculated automatically, add additional dead load and impose load. Under impose loads, if you use your right mouse button, typical loadings will be made available for you. Back on the General tab and under Type, we can see the restraint conditions for the slab can be defined. However, Orion can assess this for you automatically later on. Defining slabs for beam and column construction is just a matter of clicking in the beam regions. Let's now switch off the architectural drawing. The properties of any object can be edited at any stage by using your right mouse button. Here we're going to change the label on axis 4. We're now going to create this structure into a 10-story building. In the project tree, you can now see we have 10 stories. The next stage is to generate some unique stories. So we're going to use the layout of story 1, copy it to story 2, 8, 9 and 10. Now when you examine the project tree, you'll see that we have dots next to stories 1, 2, 8, 9 and 10, and that stories 7 to 3 have in brackets story 08. That is because they replicate that of the story 8. We are now looking at story 10, and we can tell this because it says story 10 in bold. And here we're going to now edit some of the layout. We can of course add members as well as delete, but for speed we're just deleting some of the corner of the structure here. We're now going to edit story 1 and deleting off some members to allow for an entranceway. And finally we need to edit the span of the columns defined on level 2 to span down to level 1. Looking at level 2, we then select the column and change its lens story to 2. We then repeat this for the second column, and when we examine in 3D we can clearly see the new entranceway and the extended columns.